Hello, it's the Cyber Dudes podcast. We are a new show out there on the airwaves. We are going to be talking cybersecurity from an easy, accessible, and straightforward to understand perspective. My name is Robin Thornton. I am your host. I have with me my co-host, Omar Sangarima, who will be, well, Omar's not like a side actor or a guest here. Omar is always going to be here. This is a joint venture. How are you doing, Omar?
Doing pretty good, and glad you're planning on keeping me. So that's a plus. So that's good.
Oh, we said we were going to make this lighthearted, and we've already gone straight into the jokes and the jibes. Very good, very good. So let's get into things. What is this? What is the show? Where did it come from? Realistically speaking, I mean, there's a few cybersecurity podcasts that are out there, and honestly, like, a few of them are really good, and they cast across a range of topics and manage to cover different levels of technicality. But we kind of, I mean, I don't know about you, I felt there was something a little bit missing, but also I kind of just wanted to share what I know. What about it for you?
I think it's along similar lines, right? Like it cuts across either it's really, really highly technical, which those are fun, right? Don't get me wrong. It's really awesome hearing big things, big intricate things kind of deconstructed. But sometimes I just feel as though, right, appealing to a bit more of a wider stream audience, right, and making it, like you said, a bit more accessible. I think we're going to get more bang for the buck in terms of like what both of our passions are, which is really just kind of educating folks on how to best defend themselves in an increasingly digitized world.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's we've got down here on the plan. We've got what is this? Who's it for? Why are we doing it? We've started the what and the why. Still a little bit. I think we'll go straight into the what, so that people really understand kind of what they're in for here, what they can expect from us. Part of it goes to my background. Like I'm been in the IT industry for 10 years. No, nearly 11 years now. That feels like a long time. Ooh, it's making me feel like an old soul. I mean, I've spent nearly 6 years of that in cybersecurity, but I've always been on the what we call the awareness, or more recently human risk side of it, but basically just people security, and a lot of it is relatively, I mean, for us in the industry, relatively simple, straightforward stuff. But for everybody who's not into this, or not really in the weeds of it on a day-to-day basis, cybersecurity can sometimes seem like a bit of a scary world. It's very, very fast moving. It's very much a game of cat and mouse. So this show is basically going to be, it's going to be simple. I mean, my Instagram page is where this will go out. These recordings will go out. It's called Super Simple Cyber. That is the essence of what I'm trying to get across. We're trying to make this easy to understand for people. And we want to help people be armed against all of those cyber criminals, hackers, fraudsters out there who are seeking to steal information, defraud you of your hard-earned cash, whether or not it's the main motivation, ruin your life. So that's what it is. It's going to be straightforward advice. It's going to be simple. It's going to be easy to digest. There's going to be news stories. We're going to break those down with all the stuff that you see in the news. And if you perhaps are not, if it's not being pitched in an accessible way to you, or you've got questions about it, and we will, by all accounts, probably have a conduit for taking questions. I think we'll probably put this out on YouTube as well, so there'll be the comments sections up there. But what this is at its essence is accessible, easy to understand, practical. That's absolutely what we want this to be. Anything else from your end is that what I've not covered there? What do you want it to be?
I really, when I'm asked that question on an interview, right? Like, why do you want to do this role, or what are you in here for? I I come up with pretty answers, right? The right way to kind of answer that question, and weave it back into the role I'm going for, or this, that, and the third. But ultimately, it's really to try to recapture some of that same energy as when I taught my mom how to use email, right? It
Mm.
was just one of those, now maybe she sends me a heck of a lot more than I bargained for, and
Yeah.
I may or may not have inbox rules, right? Not that I ignore them, but there's a lot of chain letters. There's a lot of here, be careful, or eat this for better health, or there's a lot some religious stuff there. But I try to bring it back to like opening this giant door into the
Mm.
world for her, right? And
Yeah.
now I see it allows her to reach out to her family, friends, me, my sister, and whatnot. But that feeling of like kind of parting the cloud a little bit for somebody, and then they
Yeah.
just were able to dive into a heretofore unknowable set of spaces and rules and entities and possibilities like that. That's a big deal for me. So I'm hoping this podcast does that for one or
Yeah.
two more folks.
That's a good point you gave me. So there's a couple of things there. For one, there was the teaching your mum about the email and the internet kind of thing, and it does remind me. I don't know if anyone, some people will have seen it. The meme with the three toy dinosaurs, the two either side, like and the one in the middle with a pencil in its mouth up at the
Yep.
computer, and it's the teaching your parents how to do computers or do cyber, and it's so. I remember the first time seeing that, and I was like, it's so on point. You sit there just going. Um, but yeah, I think, but there that made a lot of sense from the perspective of recounting that experience. What this should be, what we want this to be, is a way to improve understanding, empower people to feel as though they can do this and that they have control over their own data, their own technology, um, their their own cyber safety, right? And that's the other thing as well, right? This we've said this now. It's a cybersecurity podcast, but really, actually, there's cyber safety, yeah, and that's what we say. We both have day jobs, at a full time day jobs, and that's one of the things that we say that we use cyber safety because where we work is a place that is concerned about safety of people. Um, Other things of what I want this to be, I want to be very, very forthright and open and honest at the start of this as to, and it goes to a little bit to the why as well, but what this podcast will also be for both of us, we're hoping, is an additional sort of income stream. Right? We're doing this partly because we're good at it, partly because we like talking about it. It's an enjoyable thing to do. And it's nice. I mean, I love the teaching piece, and we're getting into some of the why here as well. But I enjoy the teaching piece. I enjoy seeing the kind of light bulb moment that people have when the penny drops, so to speak. This is full of idioms and and cliches here, I guess, a little bit. But we do want this to be an additional income stream, so totally transparent about that because it's not. It drives me insane when you get these people, or you get people on the likes of social media, on the internet, doing the podcast bit and doing it pure, saying that they're doing it purely for the altruistic means and motivations. And it's like, no, I'm sorry, you're raking in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year from advertising and affiliate marketing and sponsorship. Don't just tell me you're doing it out of the good of your heart. You're doing it because you want to put food on the table and put some money away for your future. And that's what we're doing here as well. So there will be, it may take some time. There will be digital materials. There will be merch, reasonably priced. We don't want to fleece anyone. Um,
No, yeah, you're
yeah,
right, but I mean, and I know because of both of our shared time in the industry, right? Like I think you got a couple more years on me. I'm hitting like number 9, I think, this year, and I think we're pretty decent at vetting. Like anything we're gonna have on here is gonna be legit, right? Like if
Oh
it
yeah.
doesn't work, if it's not simple, if it's not bringing value to folks, if it's something that we wouldn't use ourselves for just that same sort of value prop, we won't
No,
bother, right? It's
no.
not so I'm pretty excited there. It's almost like we could curate stuff for folks and just be,
Yeah.
open and upfront and transparent about it. And like you said though, it's not I hate those articles where you're going through, they're giving great recs, and then maybe teeny tiny at the bottom, they're like, hey, if you click on any of these links, we might get a small nibble, and then it throws off your whole perception of the advice given, right? Like I like the upfront, hey, this is, like we're gonna have stuff that's gonna generate some coin on the side, but it's not really gonna influence like our opinions on things, right?
Mm.
So yeah, so I'm
Oh
excited about
yeah.
hitting that balance, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Well, yeah, it's that. Yeah, there's a subtle. Yeah, there's a subtle difference in how you do it. There's a, like you say, it's here's everything I'm giving. Yeah, da 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 da. I'm doing it out of the goodness of my heart, and then oh, by the way, yeah. As opposed to it's this is something I use. It's great because this, that, and the other. Yeah, and yeah, I see where you're coming from there. It's I think that reminds me a little bit of because I do enough in the role that I do. I go to enough product webinars and things like that, and every single one of those is it's not just good information. It's a sales pitch because it
Sure.
starts off it starts off with good stuff, good topic, etc., for the first 20 minutes, half an hour, and then it suddenly immediately descends into and here's the features that do all of this in our product. And it's like at which point
Yep.
I turn off the webinar. I just go,
You
I
have
can't be
to.
bothered with this. Like
It's the worst.
not least because it's a, I don't have control of the budget at work. So I'm like, I'm always going to have to be asking somebody, can we do this, that, and the other? It's like, oh, does it fit in the roadmap? And
Sure.
and those are all reasonable concerns. But I'm not going to be. I'm not interested in doing the pitch for the add-on stuff because whatever. Like I
Yeah.
can't buy it.
Yeah.
Um. Oh, there we go. Who's it for?
Hmm.
Who is this for? I'd say anybody really. I mean, anybody aside from the uber technical, anybody aside from the cybersecurity people who are sort of deep in the weeds of all of this, because, and it goes a little bit back as well to what actually is this show. It's not going to be um, it's not going to be uber technical. We're going to keep things relatively high level. We are trying to make this accessible. So if you're looking for deep details on exploits and some of this terminology, if you're not familiar, we will dive into some of that. But if you're looking for deep details and exploits, if you want to be thinking about, what's the best way to set up, most secure way to set up your Linux environment, yada yada yada, we're not going to be doing that. So really, yeah, for anybody who wants to bone up on cybersecurity, who doesn't feel sure, there's also going to be a side of this. That lots of small business does not necessarily have the best of cyber capabilities, and that's not necessarily anyone's fault other than lack of time, potential lack of time, resources, uh, expenditure, or budget to do it. But there's a big problem in that regard because small to medium sized businesses, some of the biggest victims of
Hmm.
of cybercrime. What else? Anyone else that really this will be for that I've not mentioned that?
I
Anyone else you want to pitch at?
Yeah, I mean, I would try to also invite folks that maybe think, "Oh, I'm interested in cyber, but I don't know if it's for me
Yeah.
or if I'm not technical enough or this, that, and the third." Right? Like I'm hearing more and more in the industry and we both see this, right? Where there's a plethora of roles that are needed, right? That are very, very that they contribute right to the overall safety of small, medium, large organizations, but not necessarily like you said are going to be getting into the nitty gritty, of how to package and unpackage things in a Linux environment. Let's say, right? That's just the top of mind first thing I can think of.
Yeah.
Not to say that we're disparaging that sort of knowledge. That's also very critical, right, to a full-fledged defense in depth sort of approach. But I just want to, like you said, make it accessible to everyday folks. But also, if anyone's even considering, right, taking up one of those 4 million jobs, that job gap, right, that the Dice just came out with the other day. Yeah, it's now at 4. It's at 4, right? There's apparently 4 million
Million
jobs.
last time I heard.
It's I mean, it all multiplied, right? They all hung out together. Next thing you know, we have 4 out of the half a mil. But it's
Wait a
it's
minute, what
really
did you suggest there? The jobs are
hey,
procreating.
the jobs are procreating, right? Like that's how the economy. It's so wacky right
Like
now. The jobs are even
rabbits.
procreating. Exactly. So it's 'tis the season, but it's I just pitching it out to those to that subset of folks, right? If you've been told you're not technical enough, but you have an interest in the field,
Oh
this
yeah.
kind of showing you that what you can do, great fun things, rewarding things, and worthwhile things for organizations without necessarily being super uber technical, as you said.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, yeah, this is a good one if you're looking to get into the industry. And we're not going to sugarcoat it. We're going to be very realistic about it. There's a lot of charlatans out there who will be saying, we're based in the US. You might not get it from my accent, but you'll get it from my right. This is a US based podcast. There's I see so much stuff on Instagram, and I mean, I would see it on presumably would see it on TikTok if I used that thing. I don't. All of that stuff that you see, like Congress hearings about, is it dodgy from the Chinese perspective? Like, do you know what? I don't think it's worth the risk. I'd rather not be tracked. I deleted Temu for exactly that reason. It was fun for a little while. I got a good. I got some neat stuff for the workshop.
Sure.
Yeah, really cheap, but yeah, I figured it wasn't worth it. So, and we can go into that kind of stuff. What apps are good? What's potentially spyware? But for anybody who's seeing all of these posts, like saying, "Oh, you can do a 3-month course and be jumping straight into $100,000 a year job, etc., etc., etc." There's an element of truth in that. Yeah, 6-figure salaries are pretty common if you're living in the higher cost of living areas. If you're looking in the Midwest, you're probably pitching, you're pitching in the 80s to 90s. But yeah, 6-figure salaries aren't unrealistic. But don't, please, for the love of God, listeners, do not be taking 100% at face value these charlatans who tell you that you can do 2-3 months worth of evening learning and jump straight into a job just because there's a massive skills gap, because there is an issue there. I don't think necessarily so much it's hiring managers that have the problem so much as the recruiters maybe don't know what it is that they're talking about. I mean, it pops up on LinkedIn on a relatively regular basis about roles that are asking for 7 to 10 years experience in a technology that's only been around for 5 years.
It's the classic, right? Like, this language has only been out for X amount of years, and they're asking for X plus amount of years in experience in that same language or framework, right?
Yeah.
Or tech stack. And there's and to echo your point, man, if it's snake oil salespeople, right? Like, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Not saying that it's impossible, like you said, but it's they're trying to sell you something more than likely, right? They have the panacea, they have the cure, they have this, they have that, and then here's throwing money away.
Well,
In a lot of
that's the
cases.
other bit. It's the and here's one thing. We're never gonna. We may most of the useful stuff that we want to share with you, we're gonna put out on here. It's going to be free for you to consume if you want to spend the time going through, listening through our podcasts or watching them on YouTube or wherever. That information will be free. If you want it in a more consolidated, condensed format that you can breeze through it in 20% of the time, yeah, we may well have courses, but it will be all the same stuff that we say in here. It'll just be the format is
Tighter.
is more concise, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we would charge for those, but there's so many. There's all the other charlatans as well. Or I should make it sound like we're charlatans. There's all the charlatans online who, the drop shipping courses, and it's normally $349, but for the next half hour it's going to be 52 or something like
52.
that.
Right.
And
It's some weird number that they've workshopped that is
yeah,
like it's
and
not
it's like
too egregious. Yeah.
an amazing 78% off for 1 hour only, and realistically, I remember this. This used to be a thing. I think I remember when I was at university. It always felt like a bit of a pyramid scheme. It was people who uh, were teaching forex trading,
Oh
and
yeah.
it'd be
Oh
like
yeah.
a £5,000 course. But if you sign up for this thing and pay now, you can get it for $499 or something like that. And they take you into a workshop and they kind of show you all the bamboozling techniques of
Huh.
how to trade forex and foreign exchange and all of this sort of stuff. And you do half an hour's work a day trading with only 1% of your worth, and you can make all the money that you need to that day. And it just sounds too good to be true, and it is, because what they don't teach you is risk management,
I
like
mean, we could get
how to not try and get revenge on your losing trades and things like that.
we can get into that. That's potentially the subject of an
Oh yeah,
podcast, right? In terms of some of the more predatory stuff that's
no,
out there. I know you're
sure.
thinking about the same app that I'm thinking about, which I stay away from because it scares me, right? And there's been people that unfortunately have taken their own lives after, you
Wait,
know,
which one are you talking about?
oh, straight up Robin Hood, bro. Like
Oh,
remember?
that
Yeah,
one. Oh
right.
yeah.
They let somebody like trade on margin that, and that's it's funny because this just came up for me. I was talking to my niece. My niece wants to, get into, what can I do to diversify my cash? I was super excited, right? And then,
Mm,
the only thing, right, I try to, come at everything with humility. Plus, they're 20 years old, so if I come on too strong, they're just going to ignore me, right? Like as they're wont to do.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
just said, listen,
Yeah, you're gonna sound
the
like a
only
negative. There.
of course, right? Like, and so
Yeah.
the only thing that I said was, just promise me no margin. And they were like, what's that? I'm like, exactly. Like, please,
Mm,
like, let's just get baby
yeah.
steps, right? Get a little, get something else on top of your retirement. Start playing around with that. Come back to me. We'll talk if you want to get nitty gritty. But there's no guardrails out there,
No,
right? And I think it was for me that was always a continuation of those types of setups that you just mentioned, right? Like at
yeah.
the end of a YouTube clip, they figure out your algorithm. You somewhat have interest maybe in something like this, and then boom, they hit you with that. And next
I
thing
mean,
you know,
with more and more.
yeah, and your house is up for collateral. No, that's not. That's gambling, is what that is, right? Like that's
Oh,
just
for sure.
DraftKings with a different name.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
yeah,
I mean, and it's significantly more. It's significantly more risky because you can borrow many, many times more than the money that you're putting up. Like
exactly.
DraftKings won't. They'll be like, you put $100 down, you got $100. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. You spent.
Yeah,
You put $100 up on Robinhood, you're potentially trading with 10 grand. And that's
and
where it gets
that's
really, really sketchy.
it's not going to work out
Yeah.
normally.
And
Yeah.
that's a good point as to, again, we're going back into like, what is it that we're doing here? And part of it it's not going to be exclusively cyber. Some of this is going to be scams. It's going to be
Hmm.
um, it's going to be
Digital safety.
digital safety. It's going to be just making sure, just being healthily skeptical. I don't mean kind of like skeptical as to like, did they really land on the moon or whatever, right? So,
We're,
hey, look,
we're,
I'm not beyond people. I'm not beyond the conspiracy theorists coming for me for that sort of thing. The whole joke is that they got Stanley Kubrick uh, to direct the faking of the moon landing, and the joke being that, well, they decided just to do the moon landing anyway because Kubrick was such a perfectionist that it would have cost more to do it his way.
not not inaccurate, right? From what I've heard about Stanley's
Oh yeah.
style.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
But we digress there because of for all of you people who got hooked on the what are the career bits, right? Let's come back to that. We will go through some of the career stuff. We won't sugarcoat it for you. We will be very forthright and transparent about the realistic or the realisms of it. I've been talking to people. There's a few people that I I guess sort of pseudo mentor through LinkedIn chat and things like that, and they've been trying to break into the industry, and it's hard. Like it really is. There's so much competition, and there is a gap between the skills that people have and the skills that employers want. And sometimes it's a matter of you're gonna have to gain more skills than maybe that you think you do in order to get your foot in the door. Combined with it may well also take longer than you're expecting, but being smart about that. So that's that. That's really who it's for. It's for anybody who wants to learn. It's for small business. It's for anybody who wants to get into the industry. It's not for the technical people. And actually, as well, kind of like high school chemistry versus undergrad level chemistry. For anybody who's technically inclined, some of what we will say may well be, for the sake of understanding, may well be simplified to a level that's not technically accurate, but if we told it in the way that it actually is, it wouldn't go over well, like people wouldn't grasp the concept.
So please don't flame us. Please don't flame us for that. Like that's a.
Well, no.
I mean,
no, people, no. People can flame us for stuff, but just be wary that if you're unreasonable, we're going to tell you where to go.
Yeah, there's that too with the both of us. Absolutely.
So that's that. So that brings us on to, why are we doing it? Why are you doing this? I mean, we kind of touched upon it. Extra income source, but
I think, like you were hitting on, there's that gap, right? There's a gap between, I think, effect and impact of some of these issues and a true understanding, right? And I can see it even discussing it at a holiday table, right, with the extended family. Folks will bring up a couple things because they're trying to throw me a bone, like, hey, I know what you do, and like you're wont to do. Just when you're not a terrible person, you bring up stuff that they're into and strike up a conversation. And it's not that I would ever derail or tell them falsehoods, right? But it's really apparent to me that I could tell folks almost anything, right? Because there's like a gap there of like understanding a lot of times what's in the news, right? I take that very seriously, right? I even think things that I have hunches on as I'm explaining a current event. I say, this is my hunch. This is not a what have you, right? This is not definite, because I want to come at it with that intellectual humility and that curiosity. But it's really not lost on me that a lot of folks with things that do affect their daily lives, there's still a gap of understanding, and I'm passionate about trying to close that a little bit, trying to make it a little bit more accessible to everyday folks who will have effects on their daily lives, right? Like you said, with the scam pieces, with the potential, having your identity taken, things to do. When that happens, I'd like to get into a lot of those subjects to give actionable advice if the unfortunate set of circumstances occurs. So for me, that's really what I want to do, and also just have it be, like you said, like an honest discussion, right? Won't sugarcoat stuff. We won't say, buy our course and you'll have a job in 10 minutes, right? Or these do these 3 easy steps, all that clickbait nonsense, right? Of you can get into cyber if you just do these 3 easy things. I mean, sure, but I just want to be kind of Sherpas along a lot of this information.
Yeah, I don't think that's to say as well, though. It's not to say that we won't have, here's the things that you can do, the 3 things that you can do, or the 4th. Actually, the very prescient is the 4 things that you can do, and we'll get onto that in a little bit, because that's a key recommend. Well, there's 4 key recommendations really that we're going to put out for the everyday person at least. But I think there's a good point there and it's part of the reason I want to do this, and I like doing this. As I said before, I like teaching people. I like seeing that light bulb moment. But it's not to say that this won't be, and you say that we're going to do this in a way that, how do I say this, in a straightforward and objective kind of way, as much as we can. That's not to say, like, we are two people, we are humans, we have our opinions. It's not to say that there is not going to be opinion and preference in there. We'll talk a little bit later as to how security is a very personal thing. It's unavoidable. Preference and opinion, that all that jazz is unavoidable in security. But there are things that are just fundamental. I like to say, I've got post-it notes up on my wall here. One of them I'm looking at right now. It says, "Do the simple stuff well." And that's the simplicity element there. It's why I call my Instagram page Super Simple Cyber, for example. The other one, you don't have to be the best, just don't be one of the worst, right? People, I think one of the things that gets a lot of people apprehensive about cybersecurity is, I said before, it is a fast-moving topic that is fraught with lots of people doing fudge, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We use that acronym a lot in our jobs, and that can put people off. That can have people feeling like deer in the headlights because they don't know what to do. They don't really know what the danger is. It goes to the empowerment piece. We want to empower. And you don't have to be the best. Don't be one of the worst bits. The analogy I always like to use is, you're one of 10 people, for instance, on the Serengeti with 3 hungry lions roaming around. But each lion thinks that one person is a good meal, and they'll stop chasing you all after that. You don't have to be the fastest to get away from the lion. You just have to be not one of the 3 slowest. So perfection isn't something that people have to strive for. Well, strive for it, yes. Perfection is something that people don't have to achieve with this. You just have to be, a reasonable way better than a number of other people. I think a lot of cybercrime and a lot of scammers, they move like water. They take the path of least resistance. They go for the easiest.
You just described defense in depth, I think, very well, quite frankly.
Unpack that.
I think, right, like if you have a $20 item, just make your $20 item harder to steal than your neighbor's $20 item. And in a cyber sense, you're probably going to be a heck of a lot better off, right? It's not necessarily locking it down to the point where, right, like our great mentor says, you air gap the computer, you lock it in a safe and you put it in the bottom of the ocean, right? Then it's not usable. But all you really have to strive for is ensuring that your stuff for comparable value is a little bit trickier to get to, or just there's a little bit more effort that folks have to expend. And by and large, there's other factors, of course, right? We're being open and transparent, but by and large, that's going to be your way to consistent safety, right? Just don't stumble on, like you said, the simple things.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, I like to go for a football analogy there, and I'm talking Premier League. I'm not talking the throwing of the ball, because you can have some of the most talented players in the world in your team, but if they don't take the time to understand how each other is working, I would say that's a simple thing to consider, or maybe they can be some of the best. Those guys that do the ball juggling stuff, and they'll flip it up onto the back of their neck and then on their head and all that. They got all that close ball control type stuff, but if they can't pass 10 yards, 11 of those guys are not going to make a very good and a very successful team. So doing those simple bits well, again, it's very much the same as cybersecurity. I think it's probably a good little segue in there as far as talking about scammers and path of least resistance. And the other analogy that I would also take there as well is likening it to, say, burglary. Right? You got a street You got a street full of houses that are all most of which are locked, but a few have the windows open, and there's signs that nobody's home. Like which house is going to get burgled. So going in there with that crime angle to it, let's talk about cybercrime. So why is cybercrime such a big deal?
It's the money, baby. It's always right. Why do you rob banks? That's where they keep the cash, right? The old saying
Why do you
goes.
rob that?
That's.
I've never robbed a bank in my life. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm just saying, yeah, allegedly, right? But it's really like I think we say even at the 9 to 5, right? There's the testable things that are done, and why is it consistently still being done, or why do these simple attacks seem to be assailing the gates at every moment of every day of every week, the year? It's because it's effective and because you still get money for it, right? The ROI is still positive, and in a lot of cases, overwhelmingly positive for these scammers and these criminals to ply their trade and traffic in digital wares, right? So I think it's still very lucrative, and there's politics wrapped up into it, right? Certain actors and groups are doing it because they don't have access to legitimate ways to get money. Right? There's that whole.
You're alluding to my favorite
Yep.
motivation for state-sponsored
Straight up.
cybercrime. There, let's
Exactly.
go into that.
I mean, if you're cut off from the Swift system, you got to find a way to make money and get cash otherwise, right?
Absolutely. So we're not going to go too deep into this because this is an episode in of itself, or multiple episodes.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about. I said state-sponsored actors. There, what we're really talking about is it's hacking groups, it's cyber criminals who are working under the direction of a state entity, a government. So, and some of the most prevalent ones here are sanctioned governments. So Russia recently very, very heavily sanctioned. They do an awful lot of state-driven hacking. But the one that Omar's really referring there to is it's North Korea. And it's my favorite kind of. It sounds funny, doesn't it? To say that your favorite motivation or your favorite quirk of state-sponsored hacking is they have to find some way to fund their nuclear weapons program.
And there's a direct correlation, right? Like I like that we're in this format so we can straight up say what we know in our guts and our hearts here. It's direct. They try to get monies that are somewhat untraceable, and they use it to do things that they really shouldn't be doing. And it's like a 1-to-1, right? They won't feed their people, but they certainly, right, will try to get nuclear materials to then make warheads and rattle the sabers in that entire region. So it's one of those things where to your point, that's a huge motivator. No, it's quirky and it's wild, but it's real.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so we've got here. I've got them up on my screen here. I think the statistics around this are somewhat kind of mind-boggling, and when you kind of think about how these have been calculated, sometimes I think that there is a little bit of incredulity. But from Statista, there's a prediction that cybercrime will cost the global economy more than $20 trillion by 2026.
That's with
which
a T.
Apparently is only a 1.5 times increase compared to 2022 figures. So we must be somewhere in the region of 12 to 13 trillion dollars even today, which is wild.
That's a lot of Big Macs. It's a ton of Big Macs. It really is. Like, that's so much money. That's a wild amount of cash. Think about that. Like, that could end world hunger. Yeah, right. Like that's what I was going for, my man. But like,
oh, I see.
You could the problems you could solve with $12 trillion. Good grief. Right? We could have a crystal palace like in Cyberpunk. Like we could go to the moon and pray, on vacation and stuff. Like $12 trillion, right? Like it's wild, and it's gonna grow up. Like, come on.
It's absolutely nuts. But I mean, and there's so many different sources of this, and ways that these scams get perpetrated. I mean, I think probably the biggest one. I don't know. It's not even. Actually, no, I don't have the stat. I don't have the stats in front of me to back it up. But always the one that comes to mind when it's about money is ransomware.
Sure.
And we'll probably end up with an entire episode upon ransomware. But
Sure.
That's a huge thing, and it kind of feels. I mean, it's only getting worse as well. And I feel the real problem with ransomware is that it's been talked about so much that people are just kind of getting a bit blind to it.
Mm. It's a little oversaturated, and it's kind of almost like being accepted as table stakes now. For that's just one of the prices of doing business in a digital world, I guess. But there's as we're trying to foot stomp and drive home, there's simple things you can do, right, to make yourself like slightly harder to be ransomware. We're not going to get into I don't think, hey, if you want to go crazy, let's do it on that subsequent ransomware episode, all the wild things you can do, right? But there's certain simple things you can do to prevent that from becoming as endemic of an issue within your organization, or having it cripple your organization, right? If we're looking at small to medium businesses, one or two successive ransomware attacks can blow you out of the water, right? It can make it just untenable to continue, and then on top of potentially the fines, right, and the civil actions that might be levied against it, depending on what level of negligence folks can prove or show that there may have been. But ransomware, it's super lucrative, right? If you think about it on its face, yeah.
And that gets me thinking about it from the perspective of, I mean, to a degree, it's really just it was a natural progression, I guess you could say, because I think look back to, at some point there was cybersecurity at some point started to exist. I think it was probably really maybe slightly pre-internet, but really the internet is kind of when computers across the world could start talking to each other. That's when it really kind of kicked off. But it had a slow ramp, because I don't think a lot of people understood the potential for all of that. First real virus was in the 90s, wasn't it?
I think so, right? Are we talking about? Oh goodness, I think it was a homeboy up in Massachusetts. No, are we
I'm
thinking
looking
about the
at it
same guy?
now.
Yeah.
I was reading about it the other day, and it's completely. Oh, actually, no. Ooh, no. The very first virus created in 1971 by Bob Thomas of BPN.
Oh.
But there was something that I was referenced.
Is that
That
like
was
the British
reading.
Bible Network? Is that like something?
I don't know. It's the one that I was thinking about.
I can almost picture the guy's face, but it's not coming to me. Like that's where I'm at.
No,
Right?
I don't
Like
know. There was one. There was the Hello Dear one, or
yes.
whatever the
Yep. Yep.
hell it
Yep.
was. But I mean, essentially, all of this stuff it's an exponential proliferation. But for the longest time, nobody was really making money out of this stuff. It was kind of just guys who had some coding ability who wanted to screw some things up. There was the one I remember. I think this was late 90s, early 2000s. A guy in Germany who created some manner of worm that basically bricked computers just because he wanted his mum's computer store to get more business.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, and that
Wow.
seems to me, as from what I can remember, that's the first real time that anybody actually, I think, probably tried to not so much commercialize, but generate money off the back of malicious software. And then from then it's just kind of
And look at us. Look at us now. Right. Look at
I know.
how. Right.
Yeah,
Good Lord.
But the small medium business piece, yeah, that's a big one. Because as I said earlier, not all of, by all means, many businesses do not have and whether it's a matter of they don't think they need it or they don't have the resources to do it or the knowledge, even the understanding. Here's another thing as to the why. You can only protect yourself from what you know that you're actually at risk of, and if you don't have understanding simply because it's never come across your desk or you've never really encountered it, if you don't know, you can't protect yourself from the risks to your business that you don't know exist. And that's how some companies end up being hacked, and some of it's just collateral damage, and they can lose all of their stuff because if your entire business, for example, is based on your digital black book of contacts and networks, and you've got maybe you've got 3 months worth of invoices and whatnot that haven't yet been paid, and those are all digitized and those get lost. You're potentially out 3 months of revenue because there's no record that you were owed that money or no record that you have that you were owed that money in the first place.
And then how many businesses can sustain a hit like that? Once, maybe twice, right? Like that's where, yeah.
I think there was a statistic was most are out of business within 6 months of being hit by a ransomware attack. Yeah. And I hate having said that because that does go to the fear, uncertainty, doubt piece. And I don't like doing it. Scaring people into
good hygiene.
That action is it just doesn't work because you make yourself seem like you're alarmist, and we don't want to do that. It's much more of a case of just trying to educate people and saying that this is the possibility, this is what could happen. Consider what steps you can take, and this is the way that we can help. And that's what we're after. We're after imparting sensible, hopefully straightforward to follow advice. I'm trying to think of there's the aspect of cybercrime as well that hits the individual. Yeah, the scams. Social media has not helped with this because phishing, and actually, I think this is the first time we've even mentioned phishing in this whole inaugural episode. But phishing, the art of fraudulent electronic communication, trying to get something, be it information, be it somebody clicking on a link and downloading a virus so that you can gain control of their computer, be it getting money out of them. I think everybody's probably relatively familiar with the Nigerian prince scam, for example, otherwise known as the advance fee. You have won $50,000 from uncle you did not won, but you've been left $50,000 from long lost uncle you didn't know. You must simply pay administration fee of $300 or something like that.
Small fee.
Which seems like a fairly good pay up, except that you never get your $300 back.
No.
Those kinds of things hit your individuals, but some of it can get much bigger as well. We could probably do an episode in of itself on this, so we can. I guess a lot of this first episode is actually previews of what we might do later on. But there is one that I saw the other day. It hits realtors. People can lose 50, 100, 150 grand at a time, and these are buyers, right? So it's not the realtors losing this money. It's buyers of homes putting down their deposit, their earnest money for a new home, but the realtor ends up having their email hacked, broken into, normally by password theft or password guessing, and fake closing documents get sent to the buyer with and realistic looking ones as well, because this person's in the realtor's email. They know exactly what all of this documentation should look like. They've got all the right details, all they're having to do is change the bank account number on the wire details, and there you go. That's potentially 5-6 figures of money that's been sent to the wrong person. Is in many instances ends up being unrecoverable.
I mean, you have those. Another one that's big in terms of hitting home or hitting on the personal side, right? Think about this is something digital hygiene wise I avoid at this point, but think about, I mean, have you sent any questionable photos back and forth and potentially, right? You have your digital assets compromised, and that could be then you're off to the races. Either your reputation is getting trashed, money again, right? Pay me, or this stuff gets out, or I'm just going to send this out because I want to ruin your life, right? It's the weaponization of shame, right? At that point,
Yeah,
through digital means, that's a big one in terms of and those motivations, right? Like again, complete episode I think on this, but those motivations could be monetary. Those motivations could be somebody that's just out to kind of ruin your life, right? Trying to hit you with the old revenge porn sort of thing there, and it's
yep,
it goes back to right or potentially abusive partners or ex-partners. It goes back to if you lock down a few steps that you can do to make it just a little bit more difficult, or at least be alerted that someone is trying to do that sort of thing.
yeah,
We won't get in here wagging fingers on whether you should or shouldn't be sending those types of things. Tis an aspect of our digital lives here, right? But we're going to try to
yeah.
show you how you can lock that down.
It's yeah, and I mean we're not here to judge what people do
Good
in
Lord,
their
not at all.
in their private life.
Yeah, that far
What
be it
people do
from
in their
me.
private lives. There's really, I mean, there is a point to be made there that there is, you do what you want, right? It's
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
the Ted Lasso. You live your life how you want, but
A nice
bad,
lasso.
bad.
No, there's a little twang at the end, which I'll give you credit
Well, I
for.
got it.
Okay.
I got it from the NBC spoof bit where I think it's Rebecca Lowe
Yeah.
saying it's just, I can't remember what it was. It's like, no, obviously don't do that, and he goes, no, you do. You live your life how you want. Live, and she just goes, it's live. I have to admit, I've not actually watched that, but no, you live your life how you want. What's important there is that you just have to be wary of the additional risk that
Mhm.
taking, storing in the cloud through backups, sending such photos does potentially expose you to, and
Yep.
it's whether you want to run that risk. And this doesn't, this can happen to anybody. The likes of, oh god, what was it? It was Jennifer Lawrence, and then who was the US women's team keeper?
Oh no,
Um,
was it Hope?
Hope Solo.
Hope so. No,
Hope
that was
Solo,
yeah,
and
that was part of a
there
whole
was
like
there was the
dump, right?
whole fappening
The
thing.
fappening,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and that was iCloud break-ins. That was stolen passwords from phishing,
Hmm.
by all accounts. But you know, there's also a lot of sextortion that is completely just fake. It's just people chancing that because
Hmm.
everybody knows that nearly everybody looks at some titillating stuff
It's the
online every
internet,
now
right?
and then. So
It's there.
you can send these threatening emails to practically anybody, and have a reasonable chance that you are going to get a bite. And a lot of it, again, it's absolutely based in nothing. Nobody has some webcam footage of you having a little bit of fun. Nobody has nude photos of you or anything like that. And you know what? If they do, so what, right? You at that point you kind of have to own it,
Yeah.
because otherwise they'll just extort you for the rest of the time. The moment that they know that you're going to pay, they know you'll pay again and again and again. You can never buy. What's this quote? You can never buy a scammer's silence or a blackmailer's silence. You can only rent it.
Yeah, that's a good
But
quote.
again, that's the whole episode. We can go into that at a later date. I think that's a good pivot into how do we protect ourselves? How do we best do that?
I mean, really, it's you're busting out classic quotes, so I'll try my best, right, to keep up. But if you put, you have to get right with anything you put out there. You're going to be okay with having it blasted on the front page of the news, right? And if you're not, then you're going to have to go through the steps, right, and check on the risk reward calculus thereof, right? So, there's just straight up right off the bat. I think one of the biggest things that I would say is just password hygiene, right? Like you can't just be, I don't want to say lazy, but it kind of is. Like you have to take it seriously, right? And that's one of your first, I think, lines of defense there. And there's tools and tips and tricks that we can get into that make it a little bit easier, right? To walk around with the levels of complexity that you need to be safe, but at the same time not have to have some wild calculus going on in your mind at all times whenever you're asked to enter, to sign up for something, because Lord knows everything you want to even look at now on the internet. They're asking to capture that email. They're asking, or may sign up for an account, and then all things will be
Cookies.
revealed. Cookies as well. Like but if at the baseline, right, you're keeping robust password hygiene. I would also probably throw in 2FA there, if you can, right? And now the can is a heck of a lot easier than it used to be even 5 years ago. So now it's like, why not, right? But it's having that be table stakes, right? Like in a lot of cities, you wouldn't leave without locking your doors, right? When I moved in with my wife, that threw me off, and we started locking our doors. I couldn't not, right? But it's just little
You
simple.
didn't lock
Yeah,
your.
no, I did. I for sure did,
Oh, you did.
right? But like she was just
You did.
out here like, "Oh, we don't do that." I'm like, "Okay, that's cool."
Well,
Yeah, it is to me. It just was
I
anathema
mean,
to
to be
everything.
fair, that used to be a thing in the 70s. All
Sure,
my time.
and I mean,
It
and
was
kind of
general.
like, and where she grew up, I guess, right? Like it wasn't nearly as much of a thing, but simple stuff, right? Locking your doors, locking your windows, that sort of thing. I think in a digital sense, but those would be areas I think would be key on my list of if I was just giving you like a top three or top five things you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go to published stuff. So the cybersecurity infrastructure, is it Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency? Is that what it
What?
is? CISA,
CISA?
anyway.
Yeah, CISA.
Yeah, CISA.
Hmm.
Which rather confusingly as well is the name of a professional certification,
I
and
knew.
it
I
drives
knew
me
you were
bonkers.
going to bring that up. Yeah, 100%.
That's a slight segue. That's another thing that we can go into as far as I'd like to have an episode segment or for a segment every few episodes or something like that about the certification of the week or something. I
Sure.
think that would be a good thing.
Oh,
Um, no one better to go through that than you, Mr. Collector of
it's
Professional
it's
Accreditations.
high key anxiety. We've gone into it. That's all.
The academic Madoff. Um, this Ponzi scheme
You don't have to get
of
professional development units if you just keep getting other certs, right? Like, right?
piling
So,
CPEs on CPEs.
exactly.
Uh,
Plus
my
a
my
car.
four things my four things come from CISA, and there's a good reason because I think it's boiling it down to simple stuff. You mentioned two of them already.
Mm.
Good passwords, so strong passwords. There's a whole, and it's a little pet topic of mine is passwords might soon be defunct with the way that authentication is moving
Sure.
in the world. It's a weird thing. I kind of hope my pet topic does become defunct. But yeah, strong passwords, that means not too short. It means not so complicated you can't remember them, but also not so basic that they can be guessed. And using a password manager with those as well.
Sure.
It's number one. Strong passwords, password manager, because it helps you keep them all different,
Mm-hmm.
which helps you against password guessing and that sort of stuff. Learning to recognize learning to recognize phishing,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's kind of a key thing because everybody gets so much email these days. Sometimes it can be hard, and some of these phishes are getting good, especially with AI. AI is a whole other avenue of cybersecurity that we can go into since ChatGPT came on the scene and generative AI and all that sort of stuff. phishing's just gonna get more sophisticated and harder to spot, but there are tricks that you can pick up and use to spot that. Passwords, phishing. Update your devices, right? I know some people, especially when it comes down to, I've had this with family members, some of them on the older side, and it's why is this saying that it's been pending update for 6 weeks or something like that? Oh, well, I didn't know, I didn't want to break anything. It's a fair concern, it's reasonable, but so much of these software updates contain security fixes, right? Think of it as we may have people coming for us on this one. Think of it as a vaccine for your technology.
Oh my word.
Okay. Oh no, I just meant the vaccine.
No, you mentioned the moon landing being fake earlier, right? And then I'm coming in saying, please don't flame us. You're like, no, please do, right? So that was 2. Now we're hitting them with the big V. Yeah, okay, I see you. I see what you're trying.
Whatever generates comments, I don't really care.
But you're not wrong.
Update those devices. One of the biggest, most damaging hacks that ever happened was actually preventable. The prevention method for it had been released 3 months before it happened. Yeah. Strong passwords, phishing, update your devices, and then as you mentioned, 2-factor or multi-factor authentication, the deadbolt on the door of your digital accounts. Right? Even if somebody's guessed your password, they ain't getting in unless you say that they can through your device. And this is one of the main things. Any email that you're ever going to get from your bank is always going to tell you, don't ever give anybody that 6-digit code that we text to you. Mm-hmm. And then we get multi-factor authentication. That's a whole nother. That's multiple episodes we could probably do on that.
In terms of the different formats, absolutely, right? And like rack stacking them and then going through like how to really implement them in a simple way, right? Because I think there's an art form to that. I think you'd agree as well, right? Like making it accessible and easy enough to actually implement consistently. So
and then which ones are good, which ones are bad? Mm-hmm. Why do the bad ones still kick around? Because I'd see this browsing Reddit, people always ask, why does text-based multi-factor authentication exist? And it's not obvious to everybody, but there are some good reasons. Primarily to do with accessibility. I mean, it's a crappy form of multi-factor authentication, but it's kind of horses for courses. And that whole bit about how do we protect ourselves and those recommendations, how you implement all of these is going to be very personal to you. It's going to depend on who you are, right? And what's suitable for you.
Yeah. Risk reward. I think that's a theme that keeps coming back up, and I think it's ultimately, right, as you're saying, it's very personal, and the calculus might be different for different folks, right? And what we're going to try to present is here's the spectrum and the range, right? This stuff might be a bit more locked down, but at this stage of where the tech is at, it might be clunkier to implement. Here might be the sweet spot. Here's definitely maybe a couple, like you said already, with the SMS based. Here's some to avoid, and here's why, right? But kind of treating it in a fair, even-handed way, because as you said, SMS, it's still, it's definitely simple, right? It's in the name.
It does work. It's just vulnerable to some stuff.
Sure.
There's another one, SIM swapping attacks. That's its whole own episode.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So I think that's probably gonna wrap us up for today. So just as we're not gonna go recap the whole thing, but a reminder for what's in store in future. We're gonna have information and advice on the common scams, hacks, frauds, underhanded, shitty tricks. We're going to have the ways to protect you to help you protect yourself against those. What sort of technology things are we going to have? We mentioned the 2FA, we mentioned multi-factor authentication. passkeys. What else? What have you? What would you want to go into on a technology wise?
I think breaking in as well, right? Like breaking into the industry,
Yeah,
right? Discussing the skills gap. I think that making that accessible. Certs. I'm here to talk certs all day. You know that you can wind me up, and then like we'll get into it. So,
go.
yeah, and it's just like, oh, this one and this one and that one and this one. Even when any of my mentees start asking me, it's like, okay, well, Omar, let's scope it down to like what I want to do in the next 3 to 6 months. And I'm like, but then you want to stack this one, and then the best way to go is that way. Don't do what I did, right? Like, and it's don't it's so that's a big key topic for me, but also I think just the simple protection steps, right? The four you mentioned, right? I did the two, and then you came over the top with the additional two from CISA. Each
Yeah,
of those could be like a series. Each of
yeah,
those pieces could technically be something where we get into, and then my eyes are getting big because we could open it up potentially to guests, right? There's folks that we could tap on the shoulder for, if they want to come in and do, best practices on a specific topic. As you mentioned, you have the password strength, right? Or the password maintenance is your
yeah,
right big key topic. Yeah, we could even do like just updating and update hygiene, right? That's a juicy topic that I hadn't remembered, but I'm excited to dive into any of these.
yeah, for sure. So to round off what else we've got in store. So as Omar mentioned, we have things like, I think it's going to be certification of the week.
Sure.
It won't be every week that we do this, and we may not release the podcast every week. It's going to depend on what time we have, but we're going to try and keep as regular as possible. But
Sure.
certification of the week, if you're looking to break into the industry, we'll have the technology piece. Also have, again, and what we said before, as far as we'll only endorse stuff that we like and we use as well from that perspective. We're gonna let's look into some APTs as well.
Sure.
We'll look into the hacking groups. We'll do profiles on the hacking groups. We'll talk about the big hacks as well. What were the things that have happened? 2014 North Korea hacking into Sony. What happened there?
Oh.
What happened in 2017 with double whammy of ransomware, both NotPetya and WannaCry? What were those? What was Stuxnet? Why was it developed? Who did it hit? That's a fun one.
Yes, it is.
I like that as well. Very
Yeah.
niche,
Oh yeah.
but it's just an interesting. Nobody's really got to be that worried about getting hit by something Stuxnetsy. At least not your average Joe in the street.
Well, sure.
It is a really interesting
Yeah.
interesting topic.
Nowadays, I would propose, right, that Stuxnet type attacks might be more on the horizon, even for small and medium businesses with the rise of IoT. Right, like we're like
Yeah.
it's so it's weird. Like it was one of those the foundational ones, right, that you can always go into because I think what
Yep.
now it was the early 2000s, wasn't it? Where it was like
Stuxnet. 09.
oh nine. I was gonna say 07, but like 09, and now it's coming
Started
back
in
around
07.
again, right? Yeah,
Started in 07.
yeah,
Went out in 09.
yeah. But then now it's coming back around again, and like potentially striking, right? Folks are even
Mm.
less prepared to handle something of that insidious nature. So yeah, good point.
Yeah. And that's a good point. A lot of this stuff does come full circle. What used to work and then didn't work gets forgotten about and ends up in a position where it'll work again because everybody forgot about it.
Everybody forgot about it. Yeah.
And since we're talking about revolution, we are not going to go the French route. We're not going to revolt. We're going to come back to the beginning. We're going to come back to what is this show? This show is the Cyber Dudes, a name we may actually have to change because there is a blogging site out of the University of Texas in Houston that uses the Cyber Dudes.
Oh, it was too good to be
Also,
true.
we're kind of aware that it's a little bit of a
Send up.
it's intentional. Like we
don't take ourselves
name, but we're gonna roll with it.
We don't take ourselves too seriously. I think it's coming across
fun, yeah.
right. Yeah, so it's more accessibility, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it ends up like El Cyber Dudes or something like that.
Los Cyber Dudes.
Los Cyber Dudes, change it to a Z at the end.
Don't do that to me. Thanks.
I kind of like that. That's even more.
Hey man, I got sombreros for days.
Oh,
What can I say?
anyway, no, it's been fun. Do you know what, as well? And the other part, in the spirit of coming back to the beginning, there was the why we're doing this. Final reason of why I'm doing this, I enjoy chatting to you, mate.
Same here.
It's good
This
fun.
is fun. This is a highlight of the 9 to 5, and and it was a like it was a no sell to me, right? When you came up with the idea, and like, hey, we should. I'm like immediately, I
Yeah,
think, like kind of, I was
yeah,
like, yes, right, no hesitation, because this is just fun, right? Talking about something we're both passionate about, respect the hell out of each other. We have fun talking to each other, and I think it's going to come across in successive episodes.
Yep, absolutely. All right, and on that bombshell, we will leave it for today. Exactly when we will have our second episode, don't know. Hopefully, it's going to be within a week or so. But
Sure.
kind of depends on some life circumstances, doesn't it? So we'll see. We'll see
We'll
what
see.
happens.
We'll see what happens. But
That
with
can be a surprise for later.
true, true.
All right. Cool. Thank you very much all for listening or watching if you've got us on YouTube, and we'll see you again soon.